Hey everyone, ready to dive into the world of press releases in China? We're going to figure out how to make yours stand out and really resonate with that audience.
And trust me, it's a whole different ball game over there.
Yeah, I was reading up on it, and honestly, I was kind of blown away by how much deeper it goes than just translating, from English to Mandarin.
Oh, absolutely. It's like you're stepping into a whole new world of communication.
So where do we even start?
Well, the writing style itself is a huge factor. In the West, we tend to go for these really elaborate press releases with lots of flowery language.
Yeah, we like to paint a picture.
But in China, it's all about clarity and conciseness. Think formal, but direct. No beating around the bush.
So it's almost like the opposite of what we're used to.
Exactly. And one thing that can really trip you up is idioms. You know those catchy phrases we love to use in English?
Oh yeah, like thinking outside the box or hitting the ground running.
Well, those can totally backfire in Chinese. Direct translations often lose their meaning and can even cause confusion or, even offend people. Wow, I hadn't even thought about that. So I guess it's super important to have someone who really understands both languages and cultures handling the translation.
Absolutely. You need someone who can capture the essence of your message and make sure it resonates with the Chinese audience.
It makes you realize how much we take for granted in terms of, just assuming our words will translate directly.
Right, and it goes beyond just the words themselves. The content itself needs to align with what Chinese audiences value.
So what are some of those key values?
Well, social harmony is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So is collectivism, the idea of prioritizing the group over the individual. And we're also seeing a growing emphasis on environmental responsibility.
So it's not enough to just say you care about these things. You have to actually show it.
Exactly. Authenticity is key. Instead of just stating you care about the environment, highlight specific initiatives your company has undertaken in China to reduce its footprint or support local sustainability projects. Walk the walk.
Like show, don't tell.
Exactly. And speaking of resonating with your audience, another crucial aspect is timing.
Timing. I wouldn't have thought that would be so important.
Oh, it is. Tying your message to cultural events can really amplify your impact. For example, if you're launching a new product, consider timing your press release around Lunar New Year.
That makes sense. It shows you're paying attention to their cultural calendar.
Right. It demonstrates that you're not just trying to push your message into the Chinese market, but that you're actually integrating it into the cultural landscape.
I can see how that would make a big difference. But I'm also thinking about all the potential pitfalls with things like colors and numbers having all these different meanings in Chinese culture.
Oh, definitely. You have to be
Uh-huh.
very mindful of those things. Red is generally associated with good luck and prosperity, while the number 4 is considered unlucky because it sounds similar to the word for death.
So there's a whole world of symbolism to navigate.
There is. But if you get it right, the payoff can be huge.
Mhm.
It shows a level of cultural sensitivity that Chinese audiences really appreciate.
So you've got the language, the values, the timing, all incredibly important. But then there's the question of where you're actually putting this carefully crafted press release. The online world in China is so different from what we're used to.
It is, forget Twitter and Facebook. In China, it's all about platforms like WeChat, Weibo, and Tuqiao.
Okay, break it down for us. I've heard of WeChat, but isn't that just a messaging app?
It's way more than that. Think news content sharing, social interaction, mobile payments.
Mhm.
It's a whole ecosystem. People use it for everything,
So it's like a one-stop shop for everything online.
pretty much. It's where brands can build communities and engage with consumers on a very personal level.
Okay, and what about Weibo? I heard it's similar to Twitter.
It is in some ways. It's very fast-paced and visually driven. It's all about trending topics and real-time conversations. It's where news breaks and influencers share their thoughts.
Sound like you have to be quick on your feet to keep up with Weibo.
Definitely.
Oh.
And then there's Tuqiao, which is a bit different. It's all about AI-powered content recommendations.
So it's like a personalized news feed based on your interests.
Exactly. It's really important to make sure your press release is optimized for Tuxiao, using relevant keywords and a catchy headline.
This is fascinating. It highlights how even subtle cultural differences can have a big impact on your communication strategy. But before we go too far down the digital rabbit hole, what about traditional media? Is that still relevant in China?
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to building credibility and trust, having relationships with local journalists and media outlets is still crucial.
So it's not just about online presence. You still need that old school media coverage.
You do. And having local contacts listed in your press release also shows that you're serious about the Chinese market.
Right. It's like saying, we're here, we're invested, and we're here to stay.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of credibility, let's talk about SEO for a minute.
Okay, so how does that play differently in China?
Well, Baidu is the Google of China, and it has its own set of rules for ranking websites.
So you can't just assume that what works for Google will work for Baidu?
Right. For instance, Baidu places a strong emphasis on backlinks from authoritative Chinese websites.
So it's not just about translating your content, it's about optimizing it for a whole different search engine and digital ecosystem.
Exactly. You're playing a whole different ballgame.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. Language values, timing platforms. But what about the actual call to action in your press release? Is that different too?
It is. You still need a clear call to action, but it needs to be culturally relevant and easy to follow. And in China, that often means incorporating QR codes.
QR codes. Why are those so popular in China?
They're everywhere. Think of it as a direct line from your press release to whatever action you want people to take, whether it's visiting your website, downloading an app, or making a purchase.
So it's all about making it as easy as possible for people to engage with your content.
Exactly. And QR codes are just a part of that. It's about understanding how people use technology and what their expectations are.
Okay, this is all really insightful. So to recap, we've learned that crafting a successful press release for the Chinese market is about so much more than just translation.
It's about understanding your audience, respecting their values, and tailoring your approach to resonate with their unique cultural context.
It's a whole new way of thinking about communication.
It is.
Huh?
But it's also incredibly exciting. It's a chance to connect with a whole new world of consumers and build lasting relationships.
Well, I'm definitely starting to see the bigger picture here. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, and I'm eager to learn more.
Me too. Let's keep exploring. So let's say you've done all this, you've got your press release ready to go. How do you even know if it's working? Like, how do you measure success in China?
Yeah, that's a great question. What are we looking for here? Are the metrics different?
They are a little different. Social engagement is huge in China. So you want to track how many shares, comments, likes you're getting on platforms like WeChat and Weibo.
Right, because that shows people are actually engaging with your content.
Exactly. It's a good sign that your message is resonating and people find it valuable enough to share.
Okay, so social engagement is one thing. What else?
Media coverage is still super important. Are you getting picked up by those big traditional media outlets? Are they quoting your spokespeople? Citing your press release?
Yeah, that makes sense because that gives you that third-party validation.
Exactly. It shows that you're being taken seriously.
Okay, so we've got social media, we've got traditional media. What about website traffic?
That's definitely important too. Are you seeing more visitors from China after your press release goes out?
Right, because ultimately you want to drive people to your website.
Exactly. You want them to learn more about your company or product?
Okay, so we're tracking social media, traditional media website traffic. What else?
You also want to pay attention to brand sentiment. What are people saying about your brand online? Are they saying good things?
Oh yeah, perception is everything.
It is. You want to make sure people see you as a company that understands and respects their culture.
Right. You don't want to come across as tone deaf?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you want to tie all of this back to your business goals. Are you seeing an increase in leads, sales,
Yeah.
partnerships?
Because ultimately that's what it's all about.
Right.
Growing your business.
Exactly. PR is a means to an end. It's about achieving your business objectives.
Okay, so let's say you're seeing all these positive results. Your social media is buzzing, you're getting great press coverage, your website traffic is through the roof. What's next? How do you keep that momentum going?
That's where ongoing engagement comes in. You can't just issue a press release and then disappear. You need to stay active on social media, engage with your followers, respond to comments.
It's all about building relationships.
It is. You want to create a community around your brand.
And make people feel like they're a part of something.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of connection and loyalty.
So it's really a long-term game.
It is. You're not just in it for the quick win. You're committed to the Chinese market for the long haul.
And that commitment shows. It builds trust.
It does. It shows that you're invested in their success as much as your own.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand the nuances of PR in China.
It's a fascinating world, isn't it?
It is. And it's full of opportunity.
Definitely. So, for those of you listening who are thinking about entering the Chinese market, don't be afraid to dive in.
Do your research, be prepared to adapt, and be open to learning new things.
And remember, it's all about building those relationships.
Well said. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn. But hopefully this has given you a good foundation.
It definitely has. So to all our listeners out there, Good luck with your Chinese PR efforts.
And remember, we're always here to help if you have any questions.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different pieces, the language, the timing, the platforms, the metrics. It's a lot to keep in mind.
It is.
But if you had to boil it all down, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to remember when they're crafting their press releases for a Chinese audience?
That's a tough one. But I think it comes down to this. What unique aspects of your company or your product would really resonate with Chinese consumers? Would really appeal to their values and their interests. Keep that at the forefront of your mind.
So it's not just about checking off boxes. It's about finding that story, that connection that really grabs people.
Exactly. You need to figure out how your story intersects with what Chinese consumers care about. What problems are you solving for them? How do you make their lives better? How are you contributing to their community, to society?
It's like finding that sweet spot where your message and their values align.
Exactly. And when you hit that sweet spot, you create a connection that goes beyond just words. It builds trust.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately leads to success.
It's about building those genuine relationships.
Exactly. It's about showing that you're not just some random company trying to make a quick buck. You're here for the long haul. You're invested in their success.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. I feel like my eyes have been opened to a whole new world of communication.
Fascinating world, isn't it?
It really is, and it's full of opportunity.
Absolutely. So for anyone out there who's thinking about taking their business to China, don't be afraid to jump in. Do your research. Be prepared to adapt and be open to new ways of thinking.
This is some of the best advice I've heard in a while. I'm definitely going to be keeping all of this in mind as I, continue to explore this world of Chinese communication.
It's a journey, but it's a rewarding one.
Well said. Well, everyone, that wraps up another deep dive. I hope you found this as insightful as I did.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep diving deep.